Most people think overthinking means something is wrong with them, that they are weak, emotional, or incapable of handling life. Stoic sees it differently. Overthinking is not a flaw of intelligence or discipline. It is resistance. It is the refusal to accept reality as it is, and the belief that peace must be earned by solving everything in advance. The mind keeps thinking because it believes certainty equals safety. It doesn't. This is not motivation. You will not be told to calm down or think positively. You will learn how a stoic mind steps out of mental loops, not by force, but by clarity. If your mind feels tired, stay. Part 1. Overthinking as resistance. Overthinking is not thinking too much. It is thinking against what already is. When you replay a conversation again and again, you are not seeking clarity. You are attempting to rewrite the past. When you imagine future scenarios endlessly, you are not preparing for life. You are trying to eliminate uncertainty from it. Overthinking often disguises itself as responsibility. It whispers that if you stop thinking, something will go wrong. That if you relax, you will miss a threat. That vigilance is the price of safety. The Stoic recognizes this voice. He does not silence it, and he does not obey it. He questions its authority. Because resistance is exhausting, and anything that demands constant tension cannot be the path to wisdom. The human mind was not designed to live in permanent alertness. It was designed to respond when necessary and then return to stillness. Overthinking forgets this natural rhythm. Stoicism restores it. Overthinking also creates the illusion that tension equals responsibility. Many people believe that a relaxed mind is careless, and that constant concern is a form of moral seriousness. The Stoic rejects this misunderstanding. A tense mind is not a responsible mind. It is simply a frightened one. Responsibility is measured by action and character, not by mental noise. When the mind resists reality, it attempts to replace what is with what should have been. This creates a quiet internal conflict that never resolves, because reality does not negotiate. The Stoic understands that peace begins only when resistance ends, not because life becomes easier, but because the mind stops fighting what it cannot change. Acceptance for the Stoic is not surrender. It is strategic clarity. It allows the mind to conserve energy, to respond instead of react, and to move forward without dragging the past or the future into every moment. Part 2. The Stoic Root of Mental Suffering. Epictetus observed that people are not disturbed by events themselves, but by the judgments they attach to those events. This single insight reaches the root of overthinking. Two people can face the same situation. One remains steady, the other becomes mentally consumed. The difference is not the situation. It is the meaning each mind assigns to it. The mind does not suffer because it thinks. It suffers because it clings. It clings to interpretations, to imagined intentions, to stories repeated so often that they begin to feel unquestionable. Over time, these stories harden into assumptions, and assumptions quietly become beliefs. The Stoic treats these inner narratives not as truths, but as hypotheses. He understands that the first impression is rarely the most accurate and almost never the most useful. By delaying judgment, he creates distance between the event and the emotional reaction. In that distance, urgency begins to dissolve. Overthinking loses its grip because it no longer feeds on unquestioned assumptions. What once felt immediate and overwhelming becomes something that can be examined calmly or even set aside entirely. Part 3. The illusion of control. The illusion of control convinces the mind that uncertainty is intolerable. Yet uncertainty is not an error in life. It is its natural condition. Nothing meaningful unfolds without it. The Stoic understands this, and because of that understanding, he does not waste energy trying to remove uncertainty. He learns instead to become stable within it. This single shift dissolves much of overthinking. When uncertainty is no longer treated as a threat, the mind stops sounding the alarm. Thought becomes quieter, not because answers are found, but because fear is no longer feeding the question. When you trust control, you fear disruption. Every unexpected turn feels like danger. But when you trust character, you expect disruption, and you are not disturbed by it. This is why Stoics train themselves daily, not to predict events, but to prepare their responses. Preparedness is calm, control is anxious. Overthinking collapses the moment the mind realizes that it does not need perfect foresight to live well. It only needs a stable inner posture. This is where the promise of control finally reveals its cost. It whispers that if you think long enough, an outcome can be secured, a mistake prevented, or pain avoided. For a moment, that promise feels comforting, but it always ends the same way, in exhaustion. The more the mind tries to control outcomes, the more fragile it becomes. Every surprise feels like failure. Every deviation feels like danger. The Stoic rejects this fragile posture completely. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet reminded himself daily that external events were never his to command. He did not build peace on prediction. He built it on adaptability. And when control is replaced by preparedness, the mind finally relaxes, because it no longer needs to anticipate everything to feel safe. Part 4. Why thinking feels safer than action. Thinking often feels safer than acting because it asks nothing of us. Action demands exposure. It places us in contact with reality, where outcomes are uncertain and mistakes are possible. Thinking, by contrast, allows the mind to remain hidden inside imagination, protected from embarrassment, rejection, and error. This is why the mind gravitates toward endless analysis. It feels productive while avoiding risk. But the Stoic understands something most people overlook. A protected ego is not a strong one. It is fragile. Strength is not built through avoidance, but through repeated contact with reality. Each time you choose action over rumination, you teach the mind an important lesson. It does not need endless rehearsal to survive. Reality is not as dangerous as imagination suggests. Action collapses speculation. Movement dissolves doubt. And doubt cannot endure once it is tested by experience. Part 5. Stillness and the fear of silence. Silence unsettles the untrained mind because silence removes distraction, and distraction hides truth. When noise disappears, what has been buried begins to surface. Stillness exposes unresolved judgments, unaccepted fears, and forms of resistance that have never been examined. This is why many people avoid silence and instinctively reach for stimulation, movement, or sound. Silence feels threatening not because it is harmful, but because it is honest. The Stoic approaches stillness deliberately, not to escape thought, but to observe it. Observation weakens identification. When thoughts are seen clearly rather than followed automatically, they lose their authority. The mind becomes calmer not because thoughts vanish, but because they are no longer believed without question. Stillness also reveals how repetitive the mind truly is. In silence, you begin to notice that most thoughts are recycled rather than new. They are familiar concerns wearing different disguises, replayed with slight variations. The Stoic sees this repetition and understands that further engagement will not produce insight, only fatigue. Awareness replaces curiosity, and repetition loses its grip. By learning to sit with stillness, the Stoic retrains the nervous system. The body learns that silence is not danger. The mind learns that it does not need constant stimulation to remain intact. Over time, stillness becomes familiar, then neutral, and eventually comforting. As this shift occurs, overthinking loses its urgency because the mind no longer equates quiet with threat. Part 6. Withdrawing consent from thought. Overthinking does not end through force. It ends through refusal. The Stoic understands that fighting a thought only gives it more energy, because resistance is still a form of attention. Instead of struggling against the mind, he steps out of the struggle entirely. The Stoic does not argue with his thoughts, nor does he attempt to suppress them. He simply does not participate. When a thought appears, it presents itself as urgent, important, or threatening. It invites engagement, asking to be examined, analyzed, or solved. The Stoic notices this invitation and calmly declines. There is no inner debate, no justification, and no emotional reaction. The thought is allowed to exist, but it is not given authority. This absence of response is not weakness or indifference. It is mastery. The Stoic understands that attention is nourishment, and whatever receives it will grow stronger. What you do not feed cannot expand. When thoughts are consistently denied engagement, they lose momentum. Over time, the mind learns that overthinking is no longer rewarded with attention, and the cycle begins to dissolve naturally without effort or force. Part 7. Reflection versus rumination. Reflection is deliberate. Rumination is compulsive. At first glance, they may appear similar, but their intentions are entirely different. Reflection seeks understanding. Rumination seeks reassurance. One moves forward, the other circles endlessly. Rumination repeats the same question not because it expects a new answer, but because it hopes repetition will reduce emotional discomfort. It pretends to be problem-solving, yet it never concludes. It revisits the same emotional territory again and again, exhausting the mind without producing clarity. Reflection, by contrast, ends. It has a boundary. It extracts what is useful, identifies what can be learned, and then releases the rest. The Stoic practices reflection deliberately and limits its duration, understanding that insight does not require endless attention. This is why Stoics often use journaling, not to indulge thought, but to contain it. Once a thought is written down, it no longer needs to repeat itself. The mind can rest, knowing the issue has been acknowledged without being fed. The Stoic chooses completion over comfort. He would rather end a thought imperfectly than repeat it endlessly. Completion restores energy. Rumination consumes it. A disciplined mind knows when enough has been done. Part 8. Why Stoics reject positive thinking. Stoicism does not replace negative thoughts with positive ones. It replaces false thoughts with accurate ones. Positive thinking seeks comfort, reassurance, and emotional relief. Stoic thinking seeks alignment with reality, even when that reality is uncomfortable. Comfort fades quickly, but reality remains, unchanged by our preferences. The Stoic does not decorate hardship with optimism or attempt to soften it with hopeful narratives. He meets difficulty with clarity, because clarity removes confusion. And confusion is the true fuel of overthinking. When the mind is unclear, it imagines endlessly. When reality is seen plainly, imagination becomes unnecessary. Accuracy steadies the mind. It removes the need to argue with what is happening. And when there is nothing left to argue with, overthinking naturally subsides. Part 9. Overthinking and identity. At its core, overthinking is driven by fear of judgment. Not judgment from others alone, but judgment about the self. The quiet question beneath every repeated thought is not what happened, but what does this say about who I am? When identity depends on constant validation, the mind becomes defensive. Every mistake feels like a threat. Every uncertainty feels like exposure. Overthinking then becomes a form of self-protection, an attempt to rehearse, justify, and explain oneself before the world has a chance to respond. This is how identity becomes a prison, and overthinking becomes its guard. The Stoic dismantles this structure entirely. He understands that identity is not something to be defended through thought. It is something expressed through conduct. You are not your thoughts. You are not your past. You are not your mistakes or imagined futures. You are the quality of your responses in the present moment. Character does not require explanation. It reveals itself through action, not analysis. When identity is grounded in character rather than perception, the mind no longer needs to rehearse its worth. Overthinking loses its purpose, and what no longer serves a purpose quietly fades. Part 10. Regret and the past. Regret persists when lessons remain unnamed. Pain returns not because the past demands attention, but because meaning was never extracted from it. The mind revisits the same memory again and again, hoping repetition will somehow soften the wound. But repetition without understanding only deepens it. The Stoic approaches regret with precision. He does not drown in it, nor does he deny it. He examines it carefully, asking a single question. What must be learned so this suffering is not repeated? Once the lesson is clearly identified, the emotional charge begins to fade. After the lesson is extracted, there is no reason to reopen the pain. The past has completed its function. It no longer needs to accuse, remind, or haunt. It has been transformed into instruction rather than punishment. And instruction does not require constant review. It requires application. The Stoic applies the lesson in the present moment, and through action, the past is finally allowed to rest. Part 11. Nighttime overthinking. Night amplifies thought because distractions disappear. The mind seeks resolution when the body is at rest, but resolution is not always available. The Stoic accepts this. He understands that some questions belong to daylight and action. At night, the absence of action leaves the mind unchecked. Overthinking grows louder because nothing external interrupts it. The Stoic responds not by solving problems in the dark, but by postponing judgment. He knows clarity rarely comes from fatigue. By delaying mental engagement, the Stoic protects sleep. Sleep restores proportion. Problems that feel overwhelming at night often shrink in the morning. This is not denial. It is wisdom about timing. Part 12. Stoic mental discipline. Mental discipline in the Stoic sense is not about control. Control implies force, and force always creates resistance. Discipline, instead, is selection. You do not stop thoughts from appearing because that is not within your power. What you control is which thoughts you choose to follow, which ones you grant attention, and which ones you allow to pass without response. The Stoic understands that the mind will always produce impressions. Some will be useful, others distracting, and many simply habitual. Discipline is the ability to recognize this and respond with discernment rather than impulse. It is the quiet strength of choosing principle over impulse, reason over reaction. This is why Stoic discipline is flexible, not rigid. It is firm in values, but loose in outcomes. Values remain stable regardless of circumstances, while outcomes are allowed to unfold without attachment. This flexibility prevents mental strain because the mind is no longer burdened with defending a single imagined future. When the mind stops clinging to one preferred outcome, it becomes resilient. It no longer collapses when reality deviates from expectation. Instead, it adjusts, responds, and continues forward. In this way, discipline becomes freedom, and overthinking loses its grip. Part 13, Trusting Character Over Certainty. Certainty is seductive, but unreliable. Character, once built, does not disappear. The Stoic invests in what endures. When character is trusted, the mind releases its grip on prediction. It knows that whatever happens, it will respond well. And response matters more than outcome. Final closing, quiet resolution. Overthinking does not end because life becomes predictable. It ends because the mind becomes disciplined. A Stoic understands that peace is not created by controlling events, but by regulating his relationship with thought itself. You do not need to silence your thoughts. You only need to stop obeying them. Thoughts will continue to appear just as sounds appear in the distance. What changes is not their presence, but their authority. The Stoic path is quiet. It does not promise dramatic transformation or emotional highs. It offers something far more durable, steadiness. Overthinking fades not because thoughts disappear, but because the mind learns where its responsibility ends and where reality begins. When you stop demanding certainty from life, life stops overwhelming you. When you stop obeying every thought, thoughts lose their command. This is not suppression, it is maturity of mind. Now rest, you have done enough thinking.